Hello, children. The topic for today's discussion is Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. As we go ahead in this chapter, we will study about the rise of a new ideology, that is, socialism. As we know, we have already studied about the French Revolution and how the ideals of the French Revolution, that is, justice, freedom, equality, fraternity, how they had an impact over the whole world. It was remarked by Duke Metternich that when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches a cold. This is exactly what happened after the French Revolution. The impact of the French Revolution was not only felt in France but also across the nations in Europe as well as in other countries of the world. In the 18th century, society was divided into the haves and the have-nots. There were estates and orders. That is, the first estate consisted of the clergy. Who were the clergy? They were the people who occupied important positions in the church, followed by the nobility, the landlords, the aristocratic families, and at the bottom of the pyramid were the common people, the peasants, as well as a few prosperous middle class. Power was in the hands of the aristocracy and the church. They were privileged by birth. They enjoyed a lot of privileges, collected taxes from the people, and became richer with every passing day. The third estate continued to be exploited, and it was the people of this category who brought out a revolution which resulted in dramatic changes in society as well as in politics. And this became a source of inspiration for other countries to follow. In France, it ended monarchy. A republic was established. People got certain inalienable rights. This prompted the people in the other European countries as well as in Asia to bring about similar changes. They were greatly influenced by the new ideas of individual rights and the question as to who would control power. The principle that government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people was firmly established. In the colonies like India, it was the French Revolution which inspired political thinkers, social reformers, and leaders of the freedom struggle to reshape the society of our country. As we were being exploited under the British, the educated Indians who had access to Western thoughts and ideas welcomed these new changes. So there were people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Henry de Rozier who thought about changes in the similar lines that the French Revolution had brought about. What was the response to this kind of change? Not every individual thought in the same manner. There were differing views, differing opinions, and based on these differing views, we categorize people and their thoughts into groups like the conservatives, the radicals, and the liberals. As we go ahead in this chapter, we will know how socialism brought about a powerful revolution, how it reshaped society in Russia and brought about a radical transformation there. It was not only limited to Russia, but slowly the ideas of socialism also traveled far and wide to other countries across the globe. Let us go back and first discuss who were these liberals, who were the radicals, and who were the conservatives. Coming to the liberals first, the very word liberal is associated with freedom, independent thinking. So the liberals were quite modern in their approach. They wanted a nation where there would be religious tolerance. It is important to note that even at that point of time, in Europe, there was religious discrimination among people. There were different denominations. There was the Church of England, which was favored by Britain. There was the Catholic Church, which was favored by Austria. So there were a lot of conflicts between these groups. So the liberals wanted religious tolerance. They wanted that the power of the dynastic rulers should end and a government should be established which would be the representatives of the people. So they vouched for a representative elected parliamentary government. They wanted the people, the citizens, to enjoy certain rights to be given to them by a constitution. And they wanted a well-trained, independent judiciary which would interpret the laws that would be made. Well-trained and independent, which means the judiciary would not be controlled by the government but would have the powers to take impartial decisions. Such were the thoughts of the liberals. In spite of having such an open-minded approach, we still cannot term them as true democrats. Why? This is because though they wanted the citizens to enjoy certain rights, they were against giving the right to vote to all citizens. According to them, only rich men, men who owned property, should be granted the right to vote. So, simply put, they did not follow the principle of universal adult franchise. What is the principle of universal adult franchise? It is giving the right to vote to all citizens, irrespective of whether they were propertied or not, whether they paid taxes or not, and whether they were men or women. Then we come to the radicals who looked for quick changes. They wanted a nation in which the government was based on the majority of a country's population. They wanted that the country's government should be formed by the will of the people. They opposed the privileges of the rich landlords and the factory owners. They supported women's suffragette movements. What are women's suffragette movements? We will come to it later. Let me just tell you that suffragette means the right to vote. So when we are speaking about women's suffragette movement, it means feminist movements which aim to bring about the right to vote for women. The radicals did not oppose private property but disliked the huge gap between the rich and the poor. They disliked the concentration of property in the hands of a few individuals. Then we move on to the conservatives. These conservatives were a little old-fashioned in their thinking. During the 18th century, they were completely opposed to any kind of change. By the 19th century, they had realized that change was something which could not be stalled for long. Change was inevitable, but they believed that changes in society, changes in politics should be brought about through a slow process, and the past had to be respected and certain things of the past had to be kept alive. This was the views of the conservatives. These new trends in political thinking were the result of a lot of social and economic changes that were taking place at that time. Since the times were changing, so were the thoughts of the people. The Industrial Revolution had occurred. We already know what is a revolution. We have studied about the French Revolution. So a revolution is something which brings about a significant change in the society, in the politics, in the economy. This brings about profound changes. So what was this Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution marked a change in the system of production of goods. Before the Industrial Revolution, goods were produced at home by the people. It was a domestic production of goods. When the Industrial Revolution occurred, people were introduced to machinery. Industries were built where newly invented machineries were put to use. Men, women, children worked there as labor. Production was in a large quantity. So slowly, the domestic system of production was replaced by the industrial system of production. So, with the Industrial Revolution, new changes began to come up in the lives of the people. Men, women, and children flocked to those places where the new industries had come up in order to get jobs. Wherever industries came up, there was urbanization. New cities sprung up there. Railway networks became expanded because the railways not only brought in the raw materials for the industries but also carried the finished goods to the markets. As these newly formed towns and cities became crowded with people, housing and sanitation became a problem. Not that all these people who worked in these newly formed industries were happy and satisfied and well taken care of. No, their hours of work were long. Their wages were low and very often they lost their jobs. Unemployment was common. Why was unemployment common? Because the demand for industrial goods was not very high at that time. So very often, to save on money, people were removed from their jobs. In such a situation, certain solutions had to be worked upon. The liberals and the radicals, they deliberated on these issues. Most of the industry owners were the liberals and the radicals themselves. They owned property, they set up industries and employed people, and they put forth the idea that such kind of individual effort should be encouraged because they were providing work to the people and they were creating a healthy workforce with educated citizens, which would bring about positive changes for the country. At that time, there were a large number of supporters who rallied around the liberals and the radicals when they were looking for solutions to these problems. These liberals and radicals were not in favor of the privileges that the aristocracy enjoyed by birth. Rather, they believed in individual effort, labor, and enterprise. They believed that societies would develop if individuals enjoyed freedom. Those with capital could operate freely, and the poor would labor for them, and this is what attracted men and women to their cause. In 1815 Europe, monarchies were restored. In the Congress of Vienna, when the European powers met, it was decided to restore the monarchies who had been dethroned. Nationalists, liberals, and the radicals became active. They did not want to go back to the monarchies. It was only the conservatives who supported the monarchy. In France, Italy, Germany, and Russia, nationalists spoke about revolutions. It was now time, they thought, that empires should be replaced by nation states, where citizens would be given equal rights. We here come upon Giuseppe Mazzini, who was a firebrand revolutionary at that time. He set up revolutionary societies like Young Italy, which worked to make Italy a nation state. He was an inspiration for people worldwide, and with the help of like-minded people, he set up this society, which was a secret society, which carried on with its underground activities to mobilize support from the people. By the mid-19th century, socialism had already made an entry in Europe and had become popular among the people. It was a body of well-known and later well-accepted ideas. What was this socialism all about? The social scientists who put forth this theory of socialism stated that the root of all social evil was private property. Individuals who owned property and employed people made a lot of profit. But did they use that profit for the welfare of those who produced the profit? They did not. Those who were employed by them merely received wages. They had no share in the profit that the factory owner made. If society and not individuals controlled property, then the property which rendered the profit would be used in the collective interest of society. It would not be taken away by one individual, making him richer. This is what socialism put forth, that society would control property and the profit would be shared by those who were responsible for it. What would be the basis for socialist societies? How would these socialist societies function? Various socialists had different ideas about how it could be put to practice. Robert Owens, he was an English manufacturer, and he thought the best way to do it was to set up cooperatives. So he himself set up a cooperative community at New Harmony in Indiana in the USA. Then There were socialists like Louis Blanc. He demanded that the government should encourage cooperatives to replace capitalist enterprises. What would these cooperatives be like? They would be associations of people who would produce goods together and share the profit among them according to the work contributed by each of them. Then there were Frederick Engels and Karl Marx, who also added to this their own ideas of socialism. According to the theory of Karl Marx, the industrial society was capitalist by nature. Who were the capitalists? The rich people who had the money to make industries. So, the capitalists had the capital which they invested in the factories, and the workers toiled there to produce the profits. The private capitalist accumulated the profit, but the condition of the workers remained the same. Workers should overthrow capitalism and free themselves from the exploitation of the capitalists. Property should be socially controlled and a communist society should be created. This is what Karl Marx put forth. Throughout the 1870s, such ideas of socialism spread in many countries of Europe. Associations and organizations came up in different countries, and to coordinate their efforts, to plan their action, an international organization was formed which was called the Second International. In England and Germany, workers' associations came up which demanded better living and working conditions for the workers. Workers demanded the right to vote, less working hours. They set up their own funds to help members in distressing times. In Germany, these associations worked very closely with the Social Democratic Party and helped it to win the parliamentary elections. Socialists and trade unionists formed a Labour Party in Britain and Socialist Party in France in 1905. Though socialist ideas were represented in parliamentary politics, these ideas also shaped legislation, but they could never form a government till 1914. It was the conservatives, the liberals, and the Democrats who continued to run the government. Let us now recapitulate what we have learned today. The first question is, what are women suffragette movements? Movements which demand the right to vote for women. Who was Robert Owens and what was his idea? Robert Owens was a leading English manufacturer who suggested the idea of cooperatives. Name the cooperative community set up by Owens. New Harmony in Indiana, USA. Who put forth the idea of a communist society? It was Karl Marx who put forth the idea of a communist society. We shall discuss about the spread of socialism and how it brought about a revolution in Russia and transformed the Russian society in the next class. Thank you.